When pain enters our lives, the first instinct is to ask why asterisk? Why this loss? Why now? Why me? And very often, hidden beneath that question is a far more painful fear. The fear that what we are going through is random, meaningless, or even unjust. But one of the most profound principles the Quran establishes is that nothing in the life of a believer is accidental. Pain is not a glitch in the system. It is not evidence that Allah has lost control, nor is it a sign that you have been forgotten. It is, rather, a part of a divine order that is far more precise than we can comprehend in the moment. Allah tells us that He does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear. This verse is often quoted in moments of hardship, but we rarely pause to reflect on its deeper implications. If Allah Himself is declaring that every test is measured, then your pain has already passed through divine knowledge, divine wisdom, and divine mercy before it ever reached you. The intensity, the timing, the form it takes, none of it is random. The fact that you are carrying this trial right now is in itself a silent testimony to a strength within you that you may not yet recognize. From a psychological perspective, humans struggle most when they believe suffering is pointless. Pain becomes unbearable not merely because it hurts, but because it feels unjustified. Islam directly confronts this crisis of meaning. It teaches us that hardship is not distributed arbitrarily, it is assigned with purpose. Some are tested through loss, others through delay, others through confusion, loneliness, or internal battles no one else can see. The test is not a reflection of your worth in the eyes of Allah, but a reflection of what your soul needs in order to grow. We often imagine divine care as the removal of discomfort, but true care, true wisdom does not always align with immediate comfort. A surgeon causes pain not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. A teacher challenges a student not to break them, but to elevate them. In the same way, Allah's wisdom operates on a level far beyond our short-term emotional horizon. What feels like deprivation may actually be protection. What feels like delay may be preparation. And what feels like pain may be purification. There is also a deeply humbling realization in understanding that Allah knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows which ease would make us complacent, which comfort would corrupt us, and which hardship would bring us back to Him. Sometimes pain is the only language that can interrupt a life drifting too far from its true purpose. And sometimes it is the only force powerful enough to awaken sincerity, soften arrogance, or realign the heart. When we say that pain is measured, we are not denying how difficult it is. Islam never romanticizes suffering. The Prophet himself experienced grief, loss, and anguish, and he did not pretend that these experiences were easy. But he understood something essential. Pain does not define reality, Allah does. And when Allah is at the center of our understanding, even the most painful experiences are reframed as part of a greater, wiser narrative. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by what you are carrying, remember this. If your pain were truly meaningless, it would not have been allowed. And if it were beyond you, it would not have been given to you. Your trial is not proof of your weakness. It is evidence of divine precision. The question is no longer why this pain exists, but what kind of person it is shaping you to become. One of the most uncomfortable truths about pain is that it exposes what comfort allows us to hide. When life is stable, when things are working, we rarely interrogate our dependencies. We assume we trust Allah, we assume our faith is solid, we assume our priorities are aligned, but assumptions are easy in times of ease. Pain, however, has a way of stripping life down to its essentials. It removes the distractions and forces the heart to reveal where it actually places its trust. Islam teaches that the heart was not created to rely on multiple anchors. It was designed to attach itself to something absolute. Yet in practice, many of us build our sense of security on things that were never meant to carry that weight: people, careers, financial stability, reputation, even our own sense of control. These are not inherently wrong, but they are fragile, and when pain enters the picture, it often does so by targeting these very attachments. What we thought was permanent begins to shake, and what we relied upon begins to fail us. Psychologically, this moment is deeply unsettling. Loss creates anxiety not only because something is gone, but because it reveals how much of our identity and safety was wrapped around it. When a relationship breaks, when a job disappears, when health deteriorates, the pain cuts deeper than the event itself. It exposes a silent question we rarely ask. If this is taken from me, who am I? Pain forces that question into the open. From an Islamic perspective, this exposure is not meant to humiliate us. It is meant to liberate us. Allah does not remove false securities out of malice, but out of mercy. Anything you depend on more than Allah will eventually become a source of anxiety, because it was never guaranteed to last. Pain dismantles these illusions and redirects the heart towards something far more stable. In this sense, suffering becomes an act of divine realignment. This is why the Quran repeatedly emphasizes tawakkul not as a passive concept, but as an active reorientation of trust. True reliance on Allah is not claimed during comfort, it is demonstrated during crisis. When the supports we leaned on collapse, we are confronted with a choice. We can either cling harder to what is already failing us, or we can shift our reliance toward the one who was never meant to be replaced. There is also a subtle but powerful spiritual transformation that happens here. Pain reduces the ego. It reminds us of our limitations. It dismantles the illusion of control that modern life encourages us to cultivate. And in that vulnerability, sincerity emerges. Dua becomes real, not rehearsed. Worship becomes intimate, not habitual. Faith moves from being inherited or intellectual to being lived and experienced. It is important to understand that this process is not instantaneous. Trust does not automatically transfer from the temporary to the eternal. There is resistance, fear, and often grief. But over time, something shifts. The believer begins to realize that what was lost was never the true source of peace. Peace comes from knowing that even when everything else is uncertain, Allah remains constant. This is why many people, when they reflect honestly on their most painful moments, also recognize them as the moments they felt closest to Allah. Not because pain is desirable, but because it removed the noise. It silenced false comforts and made space for a deeper, more resilient form of faith. So if your pain has exposed how fragile your supports really are, do not rush to rebuild them in the same way. Let this moment teach you where trust truly belongs, because when reliance shifts from what can be taken away to the one who never leaves, pain no longer defines you. It refines you. When people speak about trials, the conversation often centers on endurance, how long this will last, how much more can I take, when will the relief finally come. While patience is undeniably central to faith, Islam invites us to engage pain at a deeper level. Hardship is not only something to survive, it is something meant to shape us. Pain, in the Islamic world, is not a pause in life's progress. It is one of the primary instruments through which the soul is refined. From a psychological standpoint, growth rarely occurs in comfort. Ease preserves who you already are. Difficulty forces change. Pain disrupts patterns that no longer serve you. It challenges assumptions you never questioned. It exposes habits, attitudes, and attachments that might have gone unnoticed for years. This is why two people can experience the same trial and emerge fundamentally different. One bitter, the other wiser. The difference is not the pain itself, but how it is engaged. Islam frames trials as opportunities for inner restructuring. The Quran repeatedly links hardship with purification, not punishment. Suffering humbles the ego in ways success never does. It reminds us that strength is not self-generated and that control is, at best, an illusion. In that humility, space is created for sincerity, empathy, and depth. Pain softens hearts that were once rigid, and it matures perspectives that were once shallow. There is also a moral dimension to suffering that is easy to overlook. Pain expands our capacity for compassion. Those who have endured difficulty often become more attuned to the struggles of others. They listen more carefully, judge less quickly, and respond more gently. In this way, personal pain quietly reshapes social ethics. It transforms individuals into sources of mercy, not because they are morally superior, but because they understand vulnerability firsthand. Philosophically, pain confronts us with the reality that life is not designed for uninterrupted comfort. Modern culture often treats suffering as a failure, something to be eliminated at all costs. Islam offers a different narrative. It teaches that the purpose of life is not comfort, but alignment with truth. And alignment often requires friction. Just as metal is strengthened by fire, the human soul is strengthened through resistance. This reframing shifts a critical question. Instead of asking, "How do I escape this pain?" the believer begins to ask, "What is this pain trying to teach me?" That question does not deny the desire for relief, nor does it glorify suffering. Rather, it acknowledges that even before relief arrives, transformation can begin. Pain becomes meaningful when it produces clarity about priorities, values, and the direction of one's life. It is important to note that transformation is rarely immediate. Pain can initially feel disorienting, even destructive. Faith does not require instant insight or emotional composure. It allows space for confusion, grief, and struggle. But over time, if the believer remains reflective and sincere, pain leaves behind something valuable. Resilience without arrogance, humility without despair, and faith without illusion. The Prophet exemplified this transformation. His hardships did not harden him, they refined him. Loss made him more compassionate, not withdrawn. Rejection made him more patient, not resentful. Difficulty did not diminish his humanity, it deepened it. And in following his example, believers learn that the goal of hardship is not simply to endure until it ends, but to emerge as someone more grounded, more aware, and more connected to Allah. So, if your pain feels like it is breaking you, pause and ask what it is shaping within you. Because when pain is met with reflection and faith, it does not leave you the same. It leaves you stronger, wiser, and closer to the person you were meant to become. One of the greatest sources of despair in human suffering is the feeling that pain ends at the grave. If this world is all there is, then loss feels permanent, injustice feels unresolved, and hardship feels cruel. Islam directly challenges that world by expanding our understanding of reality itself. Pain, in the Islamic tradition, is never confined to this moment or this lifetime. It is woven into a much larger, eternal narrative, one in which nothing is wasted, overlooked, or forgotten. The Quran repeatedly reminds us that this life is incomplete by design. It is a testing ground, not a destination. When pain is viewed only through a worldly lens, it feels unbearable. But when it is placed within the framework of the Akhara, its meaning fundamentally changes. Hardship is no longer just something to get through. It becomes something that carries consequences beyond what we can immediately see. Psychologically, this shift is profound. Human beings can tolerate extraordinary difficulty if they believe it has purpose beyond the present moment. Islam offers exactly that framework. Every tear, every sleepless night, every silent struggle is seen by Allah. Not metaphorically, not abstractly, but fully, completely, and with perfect justice. Pain becomes part of a moral universe where nothing disappears into nothingness. The Prophet they taught that even the smallest form of suffering, the prick of a thorn, a moment of sadness, can erase sins and elevate a believer's rank. This reframes pain from being merely something endured to something invested. It becomes a currency of the soul, one that is converted into forgiveness, purification, and nearness to Allah. What appears as loss in the dunya may, in reality, be gain in the hereafter. This understanding also addresses one of the deepest philosophical questions. Why do righteous people suffer? Islam does not claim that goodness guarantees comfort. Instead, it teaches that closeness to Allah often comes with heavier responsibility and deeper trials. Pain is not evidence of divine displeasure. In many cases, it is evidence of divine attention. Allah prepares those he loves for what is greater, and preparation is rarely easy. There is also a profound justice embedded in this world. Many forms of pain are never validated in this world. Some losses are unseen, some struggles are dismissed, some injustices are never corrected. Islam assures the believer that the story does not end here. The akhirah is where every imbalance is addressed, where every wrong is righted, and where every patience is rewarded beyond imagination. Without that belief, pain can feel intolerably unfair. With it, pain becomes heavy, but not hopeless. This eternal perspective also disciplines how we respond to hardship. It prevents despair without demanding emotional numbness. You are allowed to grieve, to feel overwhelmed, to struggle, but you are not allowed to believe that your suffering is meaningless. Faith anchors pain within hope, not denial. It tells the believer, this moment matters even if you don't yet see how. And perhaps most importantly, this world, invites action. If pain has eternal significance, then how we respond to it matters deeply. Patience becomes a conscious choice. Trust becomes a practiced discipline. Worship becomes an act of defiance against despair. The believer does not merely wait for pain to pass. They engage it with purpose, knowing that its echoes reach beyond this life. So when hardship weighs heavily on your heart, remind yourself that your story is not confined to this chapter. What feels unresolved here will be completed there. What feels heavy now will be lightened then, and what feels painful today may become the very reason you stand closer to Allah tomorrow. Live with that awareness, because when pain is seen through the lens of eternity, it no longer breaks you, it carries you forward.